everybody. It's Servet Hassan. It's Sunday night. The name of the show is Intuitive Inc. And we have a really great show again for you this week. This time, I have a guest who's written a book called God Within, The Day God's Train Stopped. And there's a reason for that title. I read about it in the book. But she's been described by her colleagues and clients as a world-class energy healer. She's come up with something called ColorWorks. It's her own visualization process that's healed thousands and thousands of people. So we're going to be talking about that. But her life itself is fascinating because to start with, she healed herself. So we know it works. And also many hundreds of other people. She's also been mentioned in countless numbers of books, referenced in Miracles of the Casa by Josie Ravenwing, a book about John of God in Brazil, Soul Agreements by Dick Sturpin. I mean, we could go on and on. Radical Remissions by Dr. Kelly Turner is just to name a few. So, welcome Kelly. That's not right. That was talking about Dr. Kelly Turner, whose book was Radical Remissions. And I want to welcome Patti Conklin, who's written God Within. Hi, Patti. Thanks for calling in.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. I'm excited.
Oh, good. I think we've got a lot to talk about, and we only have an hour, and you think that's a long time, and it's not. And I am going to open it up for people to call in during the second half if there's anyone out there that needs a healing or wants to ask a question about what we're discussing. So it is going to go pretty quickly, Patti, so we're going to try and get through it all. But again, I would just encourage people to buy it. Is this your first book, Patti?
It is my first book. I actually wrote it 18 years ago and held on to it for 16 years. I just felt that the timing wasn't right, and back then it was Hampton Roads, but they had asked for it, and I decided to just wait. And so it released 2 years ago.
Good. Was that your intuitive? You just got that intuitively? Because you talk about that a lot in your book, to ask and be guided.
I was so busy, word of mouth. I didn't have to market, and I just felt with the book coming out 18 years ago that I would never be able to keep up with things. And so I chose to hold on to it until I felt like the timing was right. And what was cute about it was, coming into 2013, my eldest son had started a publishing company. And I said, well, why don't you take the book and put it as an ebook and, draw some business? And he's like, no, why don't you send it to the publishers that wanted it, so many years ago, but let me read it first. And so I read it. He called me and he said, I read it. And I said, yeah. And he said, do you even know what a paragraph is? And I just started laughing. And he'd say, what are you saying in this paragraph? And I'd tell him, and he'd go, no, that's not what you said. And so my son Matthew, who would attend all my workshops and kind of my backup person, we'd get on the phone and Dan would say to Matt, what is she saying? And Matt would go, blah, 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 blah. And Dan's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. And I'm like, that's what I just said. And what he pointed out was that the book was written as I speak when I'm on stage or doing an interview. And he said, you've got to remember, people don't have your hand gestures and your voice inflections in the writing.
Right.
And so he rewrote it. And just did a beautiful job and said exactly what I wanted to say, but it was an interesting process.
Well, yeah. And what's interesting is that your son, Daniel Conklin, wrote something called Introducing the Introduction in the book, which I thought was really cute. And I thought to myself, having written 3 books, my daughter, who's just graduated from the University of Pennsylvania Law School and who's now a lawyer, would never write an introduction. I thought,
what was cute was Daniel had sat with his siblings. I have 2 biological and 2 adopted and 2-step children, and so all 6 of them sat and talked about it. And he decided he wanted to write the introduction to the introduction, and I just felt very blessed that they wanted to share that with everyone.
Well, it was lovely. I thought it was very touching because he talked about unconditional love and how you taught him about unconditional love, because that was one of the things you were told to do when you were 7 years old, which we will talk about. And you said that it was part of what you were told was to teach people how to become insubstantial without transitioning, without moving to another, without dying, basically. But
right.
And I thought that was interesting because that is about unconditional love. And so he said he couldn't really describe you because that would be conditional. So it was really well done. And the whole book is well done. I really think now you've had, I just touched on 7 years old, but you've had a very interesting life, and I can see why you probably held on to the book. But tell the listeners out there how this all began. How did it begin?
I've had my gift since birth, and the earliest recollection I have is 3 years old, and my mother and her best friend were sitting in the kitchen having coffee, and my parents were alcoholics and drug users, and I walked in the kitchen and I looked at my mother's friend, and literally I saw a sperm go into an egg. And even at the age of 3, I knew that was a sperm and that was an egg, and she had just conceived a baby. So I'm 3 years old, jumping up and down going, "Oh, you're going to have a baby." And they were laughing. And then she looked at me and she said, "No, I'm not." And the particles in her body shifted. And because I'm only 3, I said, "Oh, but you'll die when the baby's born." And my mother hit me so hard. And 9 months later, her best friend died in childbirth. And at that point, I just knew that what I was seeing in the world was right and what they were trying to tell me was wrong. And so, I think so many people are born gifted. Everyone's born gifted.
Right.
But so many people become scared and they block it off. Mm-hmm. That, even though it was a severe instance, made me realize that what I was seeing in the world was correct.
Right. How did your mother react to that, knowing that what you had said happened?
Oh, very, very frightened of me. Yeah. Both my mother and father. Mm-hmm. So by the time I was 7 and had what I considered to be a visitation, she pretty much made it so that she didn't want me to speak in the house. Most everything was put in writing to her, and so it was a pretty lonely childhood. Because she just didn't want to hear my voice. It just, they weren't people who had read the Bible or had any interest in church. They had an interest in their alcohol, and that was it. So I think having a very gifted and child who was saying all sorts of things and then they'd happen, it wasn't her sitting down reflecting like I think most women would today with their children. Right. For her, it was just pure horror.
Yeah, I can imagine. Where was this, by the way? Where were you growing up?
Upstate New York.
Wow.
Yeah, in the Finger Lakes.
Okay, so tell us about this visitation you had. I know you were given directions, basically.
Yeah. So I was 7 years old, and I was upstairs in my bedroom, and a mist gently came into the room. And I fell to my knees, not because I was scared, but because there was such serenity, just an amazing serenity. And I heard a male voice, not because I think source is male or female, it's just what you trust. Mm-hmm. And I heard a male voice, and it said 3 things, that 38 to 42 would be my greatest growth years. 42 to 62 would be my greatest contribution to humanity, and I could come home then if I so chose. And that the purpose of my walk was to teach people to become insubstantial without transitioning. Right. And even though I was very precocious as a 7-year-old, I had no clue what that meant. I just really understood that as long as I listened to that voice in my life, that life would be everything I needed it to be.
Right.
It was an amazing experience.
Did you know it was God?
No.
No.
Had never heard of God. Had never been to the church, but right after that, I started walking 1.5 miles every Sunday to the nearest Baptist church, And and I remember going in, 7, and I was scared, and I was all by myself, and it was a Southern Baptist preacher in a Northern Baptist church, and I got there late, and he was hitting the pulpit, and he was saying, and you're all sinners, and I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, I'm 7, what did I do? What did I do?
Exactly. Oh God.
And it took me a long time to learn that duality clause.
Right, exactly. I mean, so let's go forward then. After that, how did you get into being an intuitive healer?
Yeah. So, I graduated early. I graduated, just before my 16th birthday. I doubled up from high school so I could get out. Mm-hmm. And life took me into, I was overseeing women's literacy programs in 30 countries throughout Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And I think the purpose of me getting that job was to be able to see different cultures and different disease processes according to what was spoken in the culture of the populace. And so right before my 38th birthday, at that point, I was director of Canine Companions for Independence, Southeast region down in Florida, and I had another visitation. And mm-hmm. Father spoke and just said, I want you to take your children and move to Hartwell, Georgia, and fully begin walking the path I asked you to walk as a child. And it took about 5 minutes, and I picked up the phone, and I called my boss in Santa Rosa, California, mm-hmm. and I said, hey, it's March 23rd, and I'm resigning July 15th. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm moving to Hartwell, Georgia. And he said, where's that? And I said, I don't have a clue. I've got to look at the map. But that's where I was told to go, and that's where I'll go.
And that's where you went. And it was okay with the kids. And were you married at the time? Were you...
I was married to a man who had been a childhood friend, quadriplegic, because I had been traveling the world so much. He needed to get out of the nursing home after he was injured as a young man, and I needed help watching the boys while I traveled the world. And so it was kind of a name only, but good friends. Right. And so I went home and I told him, that I had just resigned, and he was just freaked out. And he looked at Daniel and he said, what do you think about this? And Dan's like, if that's where she's been told that we go, then that's where we go. And just blind faith, and moved into a little town that had 16 Baptist churches within a 3-mile radius.
Wow.
And
okay.
My first visitor into my office was the minister of the Baptist church across the street. And we sat and talked for a little while, and finally he handed me a key to the church, and he said, just anytime you want to come in and pray, church is yours.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah,
I love stories like that. I just got chills because I think, you were sent on a mission, basically.
Well, it was a town that I never heard anyone talk bad about each other. And it was a great place for the boys to finish raising because I was gone so much. I mean, business took up immediately. There was no marketing and quiet times. It just took off and exploded. And then after the boys graduated, Chucky and I divorced, not because there was any problems. He's like, you've got a path to walk, and I'm not part of that path. And right. And so, we told the kids, and they all applauded and went, great, now she can date and, get out and do things. And the world really just opened up tremendously, and we stayed family, even though, we stayed divorced. We were all family. There was no separation just because the paperwork was done.
Well, yeah, exactly. Family doesn't include a signed agreement.
That's right.
So I really believe that. Well, okay, so I mean, that was one stage, and then so you said business picked up tremendously and you were gone a lot. What were you doing? Were you already doing the intuitive healing? Were you already doing ColorWorks?
I had started when I was 28. I had developed both forms of lupus, and doctors had given me less than 6 years to live. It had taken out my right kidney. I'd had a couple of heart failures, and so Father came and showed me how to move color through my body, and I moved color through my body, and not a thing happened. And I started laughing, and I'm like, why would you show me something that doesn't work? And then I started thinking about my life And my friends would say to me, you're a workaholic. You have to slow down. Mm-hmm. And I'd say, I'll just take time on my deathbed. And the deathbed was created. And I sat and thought about it. And I thought, what is it that I'm lacking? What is it behaviorally and emotionally? And I realized it was self-worth, that I was in all these PhD positions straight out of high school. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel worthy of being in them. And honestly, I didn't even feel worthy of having a high school degree because I cheated. I doubled up. Right. And so I didn't graduate with my class. So it was self-worth for me. So as soon as I said, what color do I need to remove my lack of self-worth and increase it by 80%, symptoms stopped that day. And a year later, I was healed. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of held on to that. So when I moved to Hartwell, Georgia, and began work, it was using ColorWorks with people. First it was local, and one person would come in, and they'd call 10 friends, and those friends would, friends and family, and they'd call other people, and pretty soon they were calling from other countries. So I was doing ColorWorks, and then the only training I've ever taken was a weekend in hypnosis. And I think that weekend that Father told me to go take was really a way of opening up my mind even to greater degrees, and began to realize that there was nothing that I really couldn't do because everything was particles. And so then I started teaching medical intuition and vibrational medicine. Mm-hmm. Okay. And would actually work with cardiologists in Istanbul who brought me over every year and just let me be there and start showing them the subtle energy field and how to feel it, even though their scans were okay. So it was an amazing journey, and has been an amazing journey.
Right. So you went straight out of nonprofit into going to Georgia and doing this on your own.
Yep.
And what happened to the lupus at 28?
So the lupus completely disappeared. We tested me every year since, and I've always been negative. And so never had another symptom. And so, of course, lupus is supposed to be non-curable and fatal. But I never had another occurrence. And so the lupus disappeared. And then in November of 15, I started getting ill again, not feeling well, and knew it wasn't lupus. And finally, identified another issue. And I really started digging inside my body going, okay, what is this one? And it was betrayal. And I think just betrayal, coming up from childhood and so forth, another deep layer that I wasn't aware of. And so this last year I've been working through that. But, I think that the light in all of this is, I think people, when you're just an ordinary person, people can really relate to you, and they see when you can heal yourself and really work. I mean, you've really got to get in there and find the emotion. They begin to realize that they can do it too. If they've got the toolbox, then they can get in there and start working.
Right.
So it's been 23 years of nonstop work.
I was just going to say, how many, because doctors told you had 6 years approximately to live at 28. So that would have been 34. So, and that's, you're still here.
And I'm going into 60 in August. And so when this hit last year, my sons and I sat down and had a discussion as to whether or not 62 was coming up, and whether or not I was going to leave the physical form at that time or stay on. Mm-hmm. And I've told the boys, I've traveled to 66 countries. I've worked in, 40 of those as a practitioner. And that I've just had an awesome life. And so if I choose to go at 62 I'm sure they'll miss me. But there's no regrets. It's been an amazing world considering what I started out with.
Right. I totally understand that. And you're right around, I'm about to be 59. So same. Yep. Yeah, I get it. Now let's talk about this, because you say it's all about frequency. and color and tone, because you also do something called ToneWorks, right, too?
Yes.
Okay. So the reason for that is because you say that they're vibrational, they're not passive. That other forms of vibrations, like essential oils, Reiki, things like that, are good, but they're more passive. And the more active vibration, or the only two active vibrations in the universe, are color and tone. Correct? Am I right?
That's correct.
Right. I read the book.
And, you know, it's understanding that I didn't realize until I was 28 that I saw the world differently, that I was seeing the world in particle and gray shade. And I just thought everyone saw the world that way. So, you know, when I started traveling to other countries, there'd be times I'd get there, if there'd be a high frequency, I'd have to have Sun Matt fly to wherever I was and lead me around like a blind person because I couldn't see. And it wasn't until I was 28 that we finally did massive testing and found that I had a genius IQ, but my brainwave was almost 250 times faster than an average person. So I see the world in particles. And so for me, when I'm looking at a human body, I'm looking at it as a body that is just particles. And so my sight is about 6 weeks advanced of Western medicine at this point, of our MRIs and scans. And so I'm looking at a body in particles in grayscale, just like if you're watching television and the cable goes out and you get snow. That's my world nonstop. So when I'm looking at the body and I see the particles, I can see where tone and color will start shaking those particles and shaking the literal emotions and words out of those cells. Where if I look at Reiki or therapeutic touch and essential oils and crystals and so forth, they're affecting the auric field, but they're not going deep into the cell to remove the words. And that's what's important in my world.
Right. Okay, that's really interesting. Now, it's color and it's tone. So it's tone, the tone of the color. It's not sound. You don't talk about
It is sound.
Okay, that's what I thought. It is sound. Okay.
It's colors are just, you know, people think that black and brown and red are really bad colors, but from a frequency standpoint, they move very slow and they actually do the most work in terms of shaking your cells and getting the emotions out. You know, white, purple, green are beautiful. They make us feel good and nice and light, but they don't do as much heavy lifting, so to speak.
Well,
ToneWorks is just listening to a variety of tones. Like if you listen to an orchestra, Matthew and I spent 3 days listening to different music. And the music that is now ToneWorks came up, and we both looked at each other and said, oh my gosh, that's the most horrible sound we've ever heard in our lives, and realized it was the one that we needed. And people, thousands of people around the world love ToneWorks, and my teeth just grit every time I have to listen to it.
Oh, well, you know what? Well, you said, too, when you needed to heal your self-worth, the color that you used in the end was black, I believe.
Yes.
So you see,
yes.
we don't always know what's going to work. So it's about color and it's about sound. Because
yes.
I honestly think that light is color, and
yes.
and and sound, because I chant a lot. So I mean, I think that really, it's amazing. Just the sound of Om can change my vibration.
Absolutely. I think the key to my work that's different from a lot of people is your body is very specific. If you just used even the Om of, you know, what use this Om to heal my body, it could do some of it. But your body doesn't have discernment capabilities, and you have to be incredibly literal with it.
Right.
And so even when I was working on my self-worth, the question was, what color do I need to remove my lack of self-worth, and what color do I need to increase it by 80%. So what's important before you do ColorWorks or any kind of tone, even if it's orchestra music or crystal bowls and chanting, is that ask your body, give it instructions of what you want it to accomplish when it's listening to that music. Because I've had symphony players, professional singers that will come to me and go, why am I sick? You're sick because you didn't instruct what your body needed the tone to do. And as soon as you give those instructions, then it's got blueprints of what you want done.
Right. Well, okay, that leads to a good point in your book. You talk about body, mind, spirit. And, for most of us, it's spirit is number one, followed by mind and body. And you kind of put body below spirit, body, mind. And it was interesting why. So I want you to talk about that because it relates directly to what you just said.
Yeah, I think spirit's the most important. It's what we want to bring to consciousness in order to achieve enlightenment. But I think the body is the vehicle in which spirit speaks. So if you get in an argument with someone or if you're upset with someone, if you pay close attention to your body, you'll maybe feel a twinge in your stomach or maybe your knee will hurt or something. It's your body recording those emotions in that statement. And in that moment, it's saying to you, hey, you just stored a conditional statement in here. I need you to get rid of it. And most of the time it's, just a couple of seconds and we ignore it. The mind is the least important because it allows us to go into fear. It allows us to go into the I'm not capable. I'm not worthy. This is too much for me. How do I do this? And when you really look at it, the mind in and of itself stops us from believing our true potential. Because we don't have that degree or we haven't had that training or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's spirit and then the body and then your mind. Because so much of healing, especially if it's a behavioral issue, people will go and have talk therapy or hypnosis. And those are wonderful items to help us understand the behavior that needs to change. However, talk therapy and hypnosis and so forth doesn't remove what you already stored. And that's where you need to go to color and tone to get in there for the prior events and remove that so that you can move forward.
Right. And sometimes you need, so you really want to get to the root and then get in and then ask what color you need to help you. Well, you have to buy the book so you understand this better, but called God Within. But because you talked about, I found it fascinating in the very beginning of the book, you talked about a gentleman who had pressure on his liver and, and he was just found out his sister had an abortion and didn't tell him. And then it brought back a past memory of a girlfriend when he was 16 years old who had also had an abortion and didn't tell him. So
that's correct.
So this is how we are storing, and he apparently stored it in his liver, right?
That's correct.
Right.
And the thing is, there's lots of books out there about where emotions store. But my version is it stores in the weakest part of your body in the given moment that you first experience it. And we had a beautiful woman a couple of years ago, who's not in the book, who will be in the next book. But I was doing a workshop in St. Louis. And a friend of a friend of a friend called her and said, this woman's doing a cellular cleansing in your neighborhood, and it starts in 15 minutes. You need to get there. So this woman ran over, introduced herself, laid down with everybody else, and started working. And as we moved into what I call the past life room, I realized that her guides were disconnecting from her carotid artery. And she had long blonde hair. So I really hadn't paid much attention to her because I really don't see physical form. I see particles. Mm-hmm. So during the break, I pulled her aside and I said, really interesting. That's an unusual place to pull. And she pulled back her hair, and she had a huge mass on her carotid artery. And she said, I have cancer here. And they're going to do surgery in a couple of weeks, but they don't give me high hopes of surviving through the surgery. And so I said, let's do an intensive cellular. And she had massive judgment. And we spent 2 days talking about it, doing a cellular, doing ColorWorks. And when they went in to do the surgery 2 weeks later, they had planned a 10-hour surgery for her. And they got in there, and the tumor just unwrapped itself from the carotid and just came right out. And they checked her, cells, lymphatic cells, and so on, to see if the cancer had spread, and it hadn't at all. And for her, it was a past life or genetic programming, whichever, and all she needed was to really work on that judgment. And she had heavy judgment about church and religion, formal religion. And once she was able to change her perception and clean her cells, the tumor just pulled right out.
Well, let's talk about that. That's amazing. But let's talk about the cells, our DNA, our cells. Are we carrying well, first of all, you talk a lot about how it's our soul's path almost that we go on, that there's always going to be, I like, there was a way you put it in the book. You said life is about flowing, not fixing, I believe.
Yes.
I'm paraphrasing.
Yes.
So we're here, I believe, and I'm very intuitive. I don't see particles, but I do, I get flashes of things and then they happen. Or I can go into a person's mind and read what's going to happen, because if they're on that trajectory, I can see it. But I see it. That's how I do it. I see it. Some people feel it in their bodies, like you said. But right. But now we're all here, I believe. Like think you do too. Is that we're here to learn. Our souls come to experience what they cannot experience in a non-physical form. And
absolutely.
And so no matter what happens, we're all on a path. It's really hard for people to understand, though, why they would choose sickness, ill health, poverty, death at an early, but I think it's important because that's the path you chose before you got here, right?
And it's perception. When I was a teenager and I had essentially moved out of the house when I was 12, because I knew I was beyond my parents' comprehension. Right. It was a world that was strange, but I knew I'd be okay. And I think that when people start looking at their life and realizing you can't be off path, there's 10,000 different ways to get from point A to point B. But on the day of your death, you will be exactly where you're meant to be. It's how you choose the road. And no matter what circumstance you're in, it's understanding that you put the perception as to whether or not it's a good or bad circumstance. The circumstance itself is not good or bad. It's your perception of it. And I think that if we can look at our lives and people will go, they call the office and they say, how do I know if I'm on my path? And I say, how can you be off path? If you don't know what your path is, then you can't be off it. Right? You're still going to get to where you need to be. And there was a wonderful woman who I think really epitomized all of this. And she was a nun. She's in the book. She had been a nun for 19 years and she had breast cancer. And she called and she was sobbing. And I'm like, I need you to stop crying. Take some deep breaths. Tell me what's going on. So the doctors had given her a few weeks to live and maybe 6.
Oh my God.
And and she's like, but I have so much more I need to do. And I'm like, you're in a win-win situation. If you die, you get to go back to source. And if you live, you get to stay here. So what part of this am I supposed to feel bad about? And she burst out into laughter. And she just said, that's so true. And it really is. disease gives us a way to dig deeper within ourselves, to continue to clear out the conditionalism that we have brought forward from past lives or genetics into this world and what we've created in this world. So it's not about feeling bad. It's about how do we change the perception.
Right.
And, just 2 months ago, pardon?
No, go ahead. Just 2 months
Well,
ago.
just 2 months ago, I flew out last minute to Seattle. A client that I'd been working with for the last 9 months, she had a very rare abdominal tumor. She only 35 years old with a 2-year-old baby, and they actually found the cancer when they did the first ultrasound for the baby. So they couldn't do surgery. And so the cancer had spread during her pregnancy, and she gave birth, and, they said, you might live another 3 months. So they came and we did some work together, and we kept up the work, and she was doing great. But it was clear her bags were packed. It was clear that it was time for her to go. And so she called me from Seattle and she said, I'm in the hospital. My kidney has shut down. I only have one. And, I think I'm going to die. And I said, I think you are. What can I do for you? And she's like, I want you to just come out and be here. And so for the first 3 hours of being out there, she was crying. I have this 2-year-old, I have my husband, and I'm going to die, and what's going to happen? And I told her my version of what I thought would happen, but she'd keep saying to me and crying, am I going to die? Yes, you are. This is the end point for you. And so after 3 hours, she just started changing her perception, and she started giggling at things, and she ordered this huge buffet to her hospital room. Mm-hmm. And her husband's like, that's a lot of food. And she'd look at him and she's like, you just be quiet. I'm dying. I can eat what I want. And as I got ready to leave the next morning, I spent the night with her, and I left the next morning, and she said, how much longer? And I said, you'll go before 72 hours is up. And I'm like, just, look forward to the journey. And yesterday morning, I wrote her husband, and I said, how are you and little, the little one doing? And I said, I can feel her just giggling today. And he said, it's amazing, because I was going to write you today to see if you have felt her, because she's been strong on my mind, and the baby and I are doing really well. And, it's taking that fear of dying and shifting it, going, when I look at my 62 coming up, if I so indeed pass, mm-hmm. I can't wait for the next adventure. I just, I'm kind of excited about it.
Right.
So,
well, yeah. I believe all of this. I really do. Because I also think that we kind of somewhere on another dimension, and when we are not in physical form, I truly believe that we figured this all out with some of the many same people that have souls, actually, who have been around for a long time, and that it's like, what, I'd learn a lot if you came along and you had a baby and then you just died and left me with the baby. I think I'd learn a lot, right. I think when you're up there, it doesn't sound so bad.
That's right. That's
it's
right.
Like, okay.
I think as soon as you leave the physical form,
right.
then it's kind of like, okay, this is part of the journey.
Right.
And as I encouraged him, this was the journey that she was meant to follow. Mm-hmm. And how does that interact with you and the baby? And he said, how do I do things for the baby? And I said, you get her favorite piece of jewelry, the best picture, and the best canned food that, your wife loved, and you make those a little shrine for her, so that no matter where she goes in her life, if she wants to talk to her mama, she's got the capabilities and the tools to do that.
Right.
And, I think it's important to just help children understand that it's not, It's not, we want to make it a sad thing. And certainly on the human level we miss. But I get joyful for the souls as they get ready to go, because it's so awesome on the other side, and the next journey is just amazing.
Well, you've traveled so much, Patti, and worked in these travels in many countries. And is that how you feel when it's little children who aren't going to make it past, 5 or 6 years old, if that, and they're starving and dying? And do you think that's all something that they're so predestined?
For me, it's predestined, and I think that those souls that come in and pass very early are very advanced souls, and what they're doing is attempting to teach the souls around them how to grow deeper. Because remember, when we're ill or we lose a loved one, it throws us into chaos, which is not a bad thing. It forces us to search deeper within ourselves about the meaning of why that took place. And so, even the first person who ever died in my arms was a 7-year-old little girl, and she had alcoholic and drug parents. And I couldn't help but look at the comparison to where I was at 7 years old, right, with the same kind of parents, and where she was. And I was called to her home. She was dying of cystic fibrosis. Oh. And her mother was drugged out. Her dad was passed out on the couch. And here's this 7-year-old all by herself. And so I held her in my arms, and I said, what songs do you like? And she likes Winnie the Pooh. So I sang Winnie the Pooh, and I had taken my Bible with me, and I really didn't know what else to do. I was Western director of Make-A-Wish Foundation at that point. Wow. And so I would tell her about Jesus, and I said, so there's going to be this guy who's going to come and help you cross over, and that's what's going to happen. And then we'd sing Winnie the Pooh, and I just went back and forth until she crossed. And Jesus appeared at her bedside, and her soul went right out and to Jesus. But I've been there when people have a belief they're Satanists, and Satan will appear. I have people who have a belief that family members will be there, and their families will be there. So it's the particles that come into shape and form of the deepest belief you have of what's truly going to be waiting for you on the other side.
Wow. We're running out of time. I can't believe it. I was supposed to open up the phone to callers, and I completely was so intrigued by our conversation. If anybody out there has a question, we can probably take one or two still. And I promise you the producer of the show has fixed the conferencing calling thing. Was a big issue for a little while. 949 It's 949-313-8880. If any of you have a question for Patti about anything that we've been talking about, but also if you have a particular issue that you want to discuss with her, now's the time, because it's I find you fascinating. I also think you're very sincere. I believe you know what you're talking about here. So again, the number is 949-313-8880. I have like a million other questions to ask, and we're going to run out of time. But I do want to, because it is fascinating, and I do. But so the bottom line here is, do you believe that we choose our illnesses? Okay, we have a call calling in here. Here we go. Hello. 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 We have a caller on the line.
Hello, Servette, and hello, Patti.
Hi. Patti, can you hear her?
Hi,
good.
Yes, barely.
Good.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, speak louder.
Okay, I'm trying.
Okay.
So my question is, how does an ordinary person try and see color and particle, or when you're working and you're peeling off the layers, do you just keep asking your body or telling your body, I need 80% improvement in this particular health area.
You really do. It's playing detective. And, let's say that you've got abdominal pain. And so, pay attention to what your emotions are when you feel abdominal pain and play detective. Say, what color do I need to remove the resentment in my abdomen? And after 2 or 3 days, if you still have pain in your abdomen, then you know that resentment isn't the emotion. And so change it to frustration, or change it to anger. But you can, the body's amazing. You can say to your body, I get you. Reduce my pain by 90%. And I'm working on my emotions. The other thing that's really helpful is to write down for 10 days in a row how you're feeling about life at the end of the day. Don't look back day to day at what you had written the day before. Wait 10 days and then sit down and read what you wrote. And the predominant emotion will be standing out. It'll be staring you right in the face. And that's where to start. It takes 30 to 45 days to change an emotion and move it out of your body. And so you do your ColorWorks or ToneWorks every day for 30 days or 45 days. And then you're ready for the next layer. It's just that onion peel that we just continually pull off through our life. People say, how much longer before I become enlightened? It's like, well, when you become enlightened, you leave this sphere. So as long as you're still here, there's still work to do, on all of us. So just start somewhere. And people go, how do I know that I'm right? You can't be wrong, because we all have the whole variety of emotions in our body. So just be willing to start somewhere.
Thank you.
I have a
question. Does that make sense? And the resentment in your abdomen was specifically for you, by the way, the 1 minute skivvy.
Yes, I was quite aware of that.
I have a question for the caller. Caller, thank you for calling in, first of all. But why would you just say 80%? Why would you not want it to be healed 100%?
Well, I thought it was a place to start, and Patti had mentioned the 80% when she had lupus, so I was just drawing off my memory.
Yeah.
But yes, absolutely. Asking for 100% makes more sense.
And the thing about asking for 100% is virtually all the populace doesn't believe they can heal themselves 100% instantly. But if you can put it at 80% and they can accomplish that, then they can move forward to the next 20%. But most of us subconsciously, if I say, I want to heal this 100%, the subconscious gets involved, and there's insecurity about how I can do it, and then it's the domino effects into not being able to do it at all. So I recommend people doing 80% and getting that taken out of the way, and then finishing up the 20%.
Perfect. Thank you for calling in. I really appreciate that. Great question.
And thank you. Okay, thank you to both of you ladies. I enjoyed the conversation very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Well, there you go, Patti. That's my fault because I waited too long I was having so much fun talking to you, and I forgot to say call in. Because now we're running out of time. If somebody has a really quick question, they can call in 949-313-8880, because that's the point. I mean, that's why we're live. But also, if there's anything that you think of later, or a lot of people are afraid to call in because, it's a personal thing, or they have a question and they don't think of it till the show's over. The name of the book is God Within, The Day God's Train Stopped. And we've been talking to Patti Conklin, and it's Conklin. And Patti, where can they find this? Do you have a website? Where can they find you? How can people get in touch with you?
There is a website that is PattiConklin.com, and Patti's with an I, so it's PattiConklin.com. There's also about 20 years of YouTube videos. The book is in Amazon and Barnes & Nobles in your local bookstore, and it's all over the world. And then ColorWorks and ToneWorks are in our shop and also Amazon. And we're coming out with a whole new series of CDs called Don't Wish Life, Live Life. And we're in the process of cutting those now. And then we have webinars every month. I do a show called Quantum Physics to Metaphysics. How do we marry religion and spirituality and combine those two instead of separating those two? And then there's webinars and workshops every month. So, you know, my goal at this stage in life is to stay home, enjoy the grandchildren a little bit, and work more from home. So I just built a studio in this new old farmhouse that I purchased, and doing a lot of work from here.
Wow!
So people can have sessions over the phone or Skype, whatever they need.
Good, good. Now, is here still Georgia?
Yes, I'm in Cartersville, Georgia now, which is northwest. Hartwell was northeast. I'm northwest, about an hour north of Atlanta, and an hour south of Chattanooga. I still do some travel for emergency patients, but you know, there's no such thing as time or distance. So if somebody's calling me from England or a physician's calling me saying, hey, you know, I've got this client, we've done MRIs, we've done CAT scans, we've done blood work, everything's coming back normal, but we can't find what the problem is. As long as they've seen their patient within 72 hours, I can tell them where the origin is,
where to start looking. From not seeing the patient even.
Yeah, just as long as the doctor's seen them within 72 hours. And then there's times when I had a case last year where a gentleman was hemorrhaging to death in London, and his doctors called, and we were talking on the phone, and Father spoke very clearly, and he said, I want you on the next flight to London. And it took me 3 days to get the hemorrhaging stopped, just by manipulating his particles to get them stopped. And then we had a dramatic potassium drop that I had to take care of. And what was cute is, you know, everybody's looking at you weird, you know, when you're coming in and you're working with the physicians. And I was walking by another room, and the doctor was coming out, and I looked at him and I said, do you know your patient is going to blow an aneurysm in an hour? You really need to get OR on board. And he just thought I was a nut. And my doctor, or the client's doctor that I had been working with, walked by, and he's like, no, believe her.
Right.
It's going to blow.
Yeah. And it did,
so I have a 96% success rating.
Oh, I believe that. And I'm sure it happened too, right? I mean,
well, they got OR set. I mean, the doctor that I had been working with my client, convinced him to call OR and get her up there. And so they were able to save her.
Okay, so now what about, thank God, but what about, like, if I were talking to you and I said, you know, after my husband died 22 years ago now and left us with nothing and didn't tell me he didn't divorce his first wife, whatever. Anyway, I had a little 5-year-old and was left alone. I got Bell's palsy with nothing. So basically, I raised her myself and it's all been good. But I got Bell's palsy like maybe 6 months later, and I knew I did it to myself. I mean, I knew I did it to myself. Now, I didn't know you then, and I kind of got over it over time, even though you can still kind of see traces of it a tiny bit even now. But had I known you, could I call you and you could do it on the phone? Would you be able to pinpoint my particles on the phone?
Absolutely, and push energy to you, and hopefully take it away during that half hour that we were on the phone. If not, you'd get ColorWorks homework, and then I'd probably follow up with you to make sure things are healing the way they need to heal. We have a protocol in the office that people, you know, with ordinary illnesses that are not life-threatening can only call me 3 times. Because I believe that if I show you where the origin is, what the behavior is, the emotional component, and I give you homework to do it, it becomes your personal responsibility.
Right.
And so what we do during just a half-hour session is we talk about what's going on personally, professionally, and physically right now. And as you talk about that, your body gives me its whole life history. And so when you may be saying, well, this is going on in my life, but it's not a problem, and your body's going, whoa, stop the presses, it's a huge issue.
Right.
Then I stop you and say, no, let's look at the correlation of what happened then and what's happening now. This is really the issue.
Right.
And then get ColorWorks to heal it.
Right. And also we're running out of time, so I'm going to squeeze this in the very last minute here because it's the show's almost over. But it's interesting to me that you said earlier on when you were first starting out and you realized, all these people, because I ran away when I was 14 years old too, and you feel, you just graduate from, and all these other people have degrees and you don't, and it really does affect your self-worth, and you said at some point you became a workaholic, and then you said, I'll wait to rest till I'm on my deathbed. Now, and then you got sick. The thing about that is, and the point I want to make to people listening out there at the very last minute here is that you have to watch what you say.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
your body records every single word, and it doesn't have discernment. Mm-hmm. Even if you say something unkind or snarky about somebody else, your body takes it in internally. It does not know you're speaking of someone else.
Right.
And so every word you're speaking, if you're being unkind to someone, if you look at somebody and say, oh, what an ugly blouse, your body's taking it into yourself as you're wearing ugly clothes. And if you say, wow, that's a beautiful blouse, your own body's going, wow, thank you. And
right.
it takes it as a positive.
Right.
It's so important. Critical to watch your words.
It's critical. And it is important to listen to your body, because I think your body is telling you something all the time. And if you just tune into it and pay attention and ask what it's trying to tell you, you will likely 90% of the time get the answer. Yourself.
Absolutely.
I truly believe we're all intuitive in that respect, and our body knows, and it will tell you.
Our body knows.
It will lead you and guide you, right?
It is so true if you just are willing to pay attention to it. And, like I said, just even that little stomach ache, it's like when we get an allergic reaction, you're like, oh, I'm allergic to this. Mm-hmm. What you don't stop and do is look at what your emotional component was 24 hours prior to the allergic reaction, because it's that emotion that created the allergy. And you reinforcing it, saying, I'm allergic to this, your body goes, oh, okay, all right, I'm allergic to it. Allergies, environmental allergies, people that have been stuck in their homes for 20 years, within one day are out doing things after they've done a cellular cleansing, because the belief is gone.
Yeah. I have to stop you, Patti, or we'll go into the next show, and then he will kill me. So we cannot do that. But here's what I'd like to do, because there's a lot more to talk about. I know you're working on another book. Can we have you back?
I would love to come back. I've really enjoyed this.
Okay, and the name of the book again is God Within, because I have literally 900 more questions. God Within, The Day God's Train Stopped, and there's an interesting reason for the subtitle. The Day God's Train Stopped, it was a dream, and see, we didn't even get to that. The author here is Patti Conklin, and you can find out anything about her at patticonklin.com, and it's PattiConklin.com. And yes, we'll just have you back on. Let's wait until you've started your next book and it's on its way. We can start promoting it before it's out, and we can finish talking about this book as well. How's that?
Beautiful.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Patti. I appreciate it. We're out of time here. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye. What a great guest. What a great call. And I am out of time. So I'm just going to say go to my website if there's anything you want to know. ServetHassan.com, ServetHassan. and it'll show you where my blogs are, where my private consultations are. I'll be doing webinars again in September as well as private ones. I'll be traveling again then. Next week is Memorial Day weekend, so it'll be a pre-taped show, but it's awesome. It's Hans Reiner. He's written the book called Complete Book of Ayurveda. I will put that on my website as well, and I'll send out information on it too. Tune in, and I'll be back in June. And again, be you to the full, because that's what's really beautiful. That's what gets you where you need to go and gives you everything you need. Take care. I'll see you next week. Bye.